Welcome to the 10th video in this series of short videos I'm recording in honor of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the release of my most recent book. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the previous videos, I invite you to do that. In the last video, I was talking about the repercussions of the divisions that were built into our system, the American system, by the framers. And one of the major repercussions is an inability to respond to the majority will, or what we sometimes call a lack of responsiveness. And I used the issue of illegal immigration to make that case. Today, I'm talking about a second repercussion of the structural divisions in our system. And I'm going to use another issue to make that case. As usual, I'm going to begin with a quote and then say a few words about it. So the quote I'm coming to you with today is from a framer that is better known today as a rapper. Yes, I'm talking about Alexander Hamilton, who in Federalist 70, the amazing Federalist Papers, in Federalist number 70, he said the following: "A government ill executed, whatever it may be in theory, must be in practice bad government." And I'm going to repeat that because it's Hamilton, it's Federalist 70, and it's an incredibly important quote. "A government ill executed, whatever it may be in theory, must be in practice a bad government." And what did he mean by that? What he meant was that performance, the ability to design, deliver, and effectively administer policy matters. And it's a critical aspect of how we judge the health of our government. Someone else I respect a good deal, another writer, much more contemporary writer, James McGregor Burns, said something similar. He said, "It is the failure of the American system to produce that has most alienated leaders and followers alike." Why is the government, the U.S. government, unable to produce or to effectively administer or to execute, as Alexander Hamilton talked about? It's because of the structural divisions in our system. And when a government is unable to deliver for, produce for, administer a policy that people are demanding, that is critical, if they can't do that over long periods of time, people begin to feel disenchanted with, frustrated with the government. And I'm going to give you an example of a case in which this has happened. There's many cases to choose from, but let me just give you one. It's one many of you probably remember. In May 2020, George Floyd, an unarmed black man, was killed at the hands of a white police officer in Minneapolis. Video of this horrific killing was released, and it provoked outrage across the country and led to massive protests and calls to finally address centuries of systemic and structural racism inherent in the American policing practices and American society writ large. Shortly after that, National Public Radio spoke to a former federal prosecutor, Attorney Baines, who at one point was in the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. And he had co-authored the department's report on the Ferguson, Missouri Police Department. That study was prompted by the death of another unarmed black man, Michael Brown, who was killed in Ferguson in 2014. Brown's killing was the second to get a good deal of attention during that summer, the summer of 2014, because just weeks prior, another unarmed black man, Eric Garner, was also killed at the hands of police officers in Staten Island, New York. And like Floyd's killing in 2020, the deaths of Brown and Garner were in 2014, were viewed by many Americans and others as part of a larger pattern of systemic racism in policing. In the years prior to Floyd's death, you had stunning poll results. 9 out of 10 Americans saying racial discrimination was a problem. 6 and 7 out of 10 saying it was a big problem, particularly as it pertained to policing. And the 2015 Justice Department report that Attorney Baines had helped produce, he talked about in that radio interview some of the many recommendations that for reform that had been made in that report. All of those reforms could have helped, according to the experts, prevent Floyd's death. But, of course, none of the proposals were adopted. Given how the American system operates, it's not surprising to anyone that the recommendations were adopted. Nor is it surprising that in response to the failure on the part of the government to act and address this issue of systemic racism and the killing of unarmed Black men at the hands of police officers, that after Floyd's killing, and so many years and centuries, in fact, of frustration, millions of Americans took to the streets to demand action. There are so many other examples we can use to illustrate examples of the government not being able to perform, produce, execute, administer the law. The problem, as Alexander Hamilton talked about, is one that you can think of in this way. Good government delivers for its people most of the time. Bad government does not. And the United States has suffered for a long time from a problem of being unable to execute. And the reason it's unable to execute is complicated. But one of the primary reasons is that the system was designed to be divided. Separation of powers, federalism, checks and balances, bicameralism, the list goes on and on. The reasons for those structural divisions made sense in the late 1700s when the framers created the system. The question today is, does it still make sense to have that much division in the system, and the result being an inability to respond to the majority will, responsiveness, and also, as I've been talking about in this video, an inability to administer, execute, perform over long periods of time and resolve problems that vast majorities of Americans have identified as problems that need to be addressed by their government.